This episode of Sovryn Tech is dedicated to Carrie Fisher. To Brian Sovryn, you will always be royalty. Goodbye, princess.
Come on. Not Google. I wouldn't trust Amazon either. Woo. Not if you don't use Signal, baby. Woo. Oh yes, it is. Don't let him kid you. I can't do it as good as Prince. No way.
Trust. Hot and close. Dig it now.
Come on, it's New Year's. If you ain't dancing to this, woo, get going.
That feels good.
Be with me, baby. Come on, Prince, take him to the height, to the height. Happy New Year, everybody. But let me tell you, baby, if you're looking for a hero, you've come to the wrong place. Because I don't wear a white hat, and I'm not a nice guy. But if you're looking for trouble, well, as the king would say, you've come to the right place. If you're looking for what's really going on in the tech world, woo, you've come to the right place. You're looking for that trust, baby? You got it. Because I am the Golden Stallion. I am the man of tomorrow. I am Savzu. Woo! I am the Rated R radio star. And I'll take on any other podcast in the world. If you want to go one-on-one with the Golden One, you're in for a bad time, baby. Woo! But if you want to go, well, hey, go 2-3 on one? The stallion's ready for that action, baby. That's the way I like it. Woo! Let's get into it. It's time for that old Sovryn Tech, baby. Woo! The last episode of 2016. We're going to have all the good stuff once 2017 comes around next week. Woo! 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 All right. Let's do it. Man, and we have a hell of an episode, and I'm sure Satan is proud, but, excuse me. We have a hell of an episode lined up for you. So many topics to cover, so many things to go over, and really some just amazing things taking place. Some things, one of them, I feel like, and actually, I'm not the only one. People people sent the tweets to me, and all the other kind of, social media and whatever other messages saying, Stallion, whoo, you're vindicated, baby. With the main story that we're going to get into, or actually it'll be for HackSec, but it's going to be about the same company. So, we're just going to kind of meld those two. But then the first one really just really goes further along a long-standing point theory narrative that I've been pushing on this show. So, why waste much time? Let's get into not the random access anymore. It's the Foreplay, baby. Oh, yeah. Let's get it started right up. And we're going to start it up with, a little bit of an update. God, this is goddamn hilarious. Ooh, boy. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, tech news from the future. Baby, it's here for you because look at this. This is coming from, let's see, what we got a little bit of a site here that I'm just going to read from. This is coming from the blog of Christ. What? In the spirit? Wait, Christ blogs? When did Christ get a blog? Shit. Christopher David. See, I went to his blog and it says, it shortened it on the mobile site. It says the blog of Christ. Ooh. Well, anyway, I think he also has, just guessing here. I can't say this for certain, of course, but I get the sense that maybe he has a similar opinion of himself. So anyway, but here we go. He did a write-up about in the spirit of transparency, and I'm just going to read a little bit here. Of course, we talked about Arcade City. We've been covering it a few times. In fact, for like 2 or 3 weeks. This might have been back in September. Yes, it was back in early September when we did a whole major part of a Sovryn Tech episode covering Arcade City, and of course the great work done by Roger Paxton over at the Lava Flow podcast. Which, boy, you want to check that out if you never have. We tag teamed it effectively, and just kind of like tore this whole idea of Arcade City a new one. And for a couple weeks afterwards, I was doing your Arcade City update because at the time, this was early September, the first week of September, we were supposed to get Arcade City. If you don't know, it was this Uber, supposedly this blockchainized Uber. Okay, it is Uber based upon the Ethereum blockchain, and it was going to be this decentralized ride sharing thing, which in the abstract isn't necessarily a terrible idea, but the person implementing it and the implementation of it was nothing less. And so we're, and it was promised the first week of September, oh yeah, you'll have rideshare unlocking the following week. Never happened. Then, okay, no, it'll be the next week. Never happened. Arcade City never came to fruition. And now, things have really, changed up. And in fact, I got quoted on Cointelegraph when some of this new information came out. The new information was that now there's actually what ended up happening is a council effectively took over Arcade City. Christopher David wasn't necessarily ousted, but he no longer had control of funds or necessarily, I'm not sure to what degree he didn't have control of direction either. But it's interesting that, anyway, what's happened now, ever since that council moved in, that's kind of what this is talking about here. And I can put the link in the show notes if you like, but really, how could you not? The blog of Christ has to be at the top of Google search. So this cannot be hard to find. Just type in Christ and it should show up. Fuck, it was his birthday just recently. From the blog of Christopher David. In the spirit of transparency here, I'm just going to read a little bit. As the former, quote-unquote, Arcade City Council, what's this? Prepares to use the remaining $570,000. Boy, go back to that episode of Sovryn Tech where I talked about Arcade City. It is ludicrous that any more money was made under the name Arcade City. But let's read on. from the Arcade City token sale, which we talked about. That was ARC, right? ARC. Not to be confused with the company that runs Little Blue Buses in New York, to launch a new competing project, Swarm City, completely separate from Arcade City. I believe it's important to inform the public how the situation has evolved to this point, because it is otherwise impossible to communicate with the thousands of participants of the Arcade City token sale. We don't, it says 1,000, and then it has that little squiggly line. We don't know who they are. Big conversations about the future of Arcade City should occur openly, not behind closed doors. And he goes on to give a full update about everything. But at the end of this, what Christopher David just to break it down for you, what's happening here is that now Arcade City is kind of no more. It's really Swarm City now. And as far as I know, there's the token sale that was done for ARC can be converted into what's going to be Swarm coin. But Christopher David is once again, what do you call this now? Because before it was doubling down when he did the crowd sale or the crowdfund of ARC. Is this the tripling down or quadrupling down? Because now what Christopher David is saying is that he says, well, within the next year, which I thought we were supposed to have a fucking app at the end of September, or at the beginning, actually, of September. Actually, it was supposed to be in July before that. Didn't happen. But now, a year from now, supposedly, Christopher David is going to do something with the name Arcade City, because apparently he regained control of that. And now all of the funds and everything that was really associated, I don't know to what degree the code, is now part of this new Swarm City by this council. All very confusing and should really bother the fuck out of everybody and not want them to be associated whatsoever. But hey, everybody, different strokes, different folks, right? Or is that how you say that? Yep, that's right. Because if you reverse it, it's still the same thing. Not talking about strokes here. So anyway, yeah, Swarm Coin. Or Swarm City. This is going to be the new thing. But like I was going to say, Christopher David is now going to take Arcade City, and he is saying that you're going to have a year or something within which you can convert it to. I'm not 100% clear on these details, and you shouldn't be either, or you shouldn't be interested, I don't think either. Do what you want. Freedom, choice. That's freedom. But you can hold on to the ARC and actually keep it and invest in Arcade City once that ever comes out from Christopher David, instead of converting into Swarm Coin. It's all very crazy and nebulous, and I am baffled. Okay, because pretty much why did this council get voted in and even become a thing in the first place? Well, very simple, because Christopher David mismanaged the business. And, nothing was coming out of it. And they're terrified of what, the original 300,000, or it was 270,000, whatever it was originally, that original amount of money, was gone, was squandered. It was all, done and over. Not overdone. So, if this guy, Christopher David, needed to have an entire group of people come over and, and take over, okay, Arcade City, and then they're like, and I agree with them. This council, I actually agree with what they did. Look, we need to rename this thing. We need to get away from the branding of Arcade City. Yes, absolutely. I think that's I don't know if that's exactly their thought process, but that would sure as hell be mine. And in fact, I had said in the Sovryn Tech episode where we talked about Arcade City, I said this will probably be a thing, but it will be completely under another name. And that's exactly what happened. So score one more for the Golden Stallion. Prediction was right on. But what's even crazier is that Christopher David's just going to keep on trying. He's just going to keep on going. And how many times does a stinker have to happen for you to finally get a whiff of it? This is, I'm in awe. I'm in absolute awe that anybody, and maybe it's a roll of the dice that, and what else is funny too, is here he is saying, oh, we got to be transparent. We got to be transparent. Would you care to be transparent, Christopher David? In the past, that's kind of what got a whole bunch of trouble here. Are you going to say that, oh, he learned his lesson, and all this stuff? No, I figure if he'd learned his lesson, he'd be like, okay, I'm walking away from Arcade City and I'm, just going to turn a new leaf and I don't know, create Leaf Coin. Oh, this is so unbelievable. Silicon Valley, so much of the blockchain space, not all of it, but so much of it, it's all such a fucking mess. Anyway, so there's your update. If you happen to have any of those coins, if you're asking me, and again, I am not giving you financial advice, but if you're saying friend to friend, hey, what's your opinion? Well, if you have ARC, I would probably, convert that over to Swarmcoin or something and just get out from underneath this guy in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, good on the council for, rebranding and just moving on and saying, yeah, have a nice day. There you have it. Let's move on. Let's move on to some other stuff here. Actually, how about a little bit of fun news? This is something I don't get to talk about too often, is hardware news. Because, well, frankly, the reason I don't get to talk about it too often is, well, we talked about it a lot in October because, all the big tech giants were having, various hardware events at the time. But we don't get to talk too positively about it because most of the actions being done in the hardware space aren't really positive things at all. So this is cool. And Lenovo, they are, well, here's two things about Lenovo. One is that now a couple of years ago, there was a lot of that, what they call ad tech or adware, that was added onto the really inexpensive Lenovo computers, which, again, understand this. I say this all the time. It's like a Sovryn Tech maxim of sorts, or axiom. Maxim. That there is no such thing as a $200 computer. Okay, like understand that. I mean, yeah, if it's a Raspberry Pi, okay. But or should I say there's no such thing as a $200 laptop? How about that? There's no such thing as a $200 laptop. There's such a thing as a $600 laptop. And if that $600 laptop happens to cost $200, it's because the company that made it, the manufacturer, put a shit ton of ad tech and adware onto that computer, which, offset the price to allow them to sell it for $200 or, even $300 or whatever. Okay, keep that in mind. In my opinion, that's an absolute fact and reality, unless they're using really antiquated hardware, which you kind of can't get away with, now. And Chromebooks would be somewhat of an exception to this, maybe, because they can get away with much lower end hardware. But anyway, even that is, Chromebooks themselves in many ways are getting subsidized by Google anyway. I don't know to how far of a degree they are, other than the fact that, a company doesn't have to pay for the license like they do with Windows. They don't have to pay for, they don't have to pay the license fee, and they can be an OEM or, well, OEM's not even really a thing, I guess, with Chrome OS. Regardless, anyway, not getting lost in those weeds. But Lenovo has said that they are now removing all of that crapware. They are making their computers as signature editions. Now, you can ask what the hell took them so long, because, again, this was probably 2 years ago when they got in a lot of trouble with, was it Sailfish? Or I forget the name of it, that really, really bad bit of crapware, as they would call it, but really, it's adware. It had to do with advertising, sending an advertising ID. Yeah, it was something like that. And I mean, when they got caught with that, I was recommending the boycott. I was like, no, fuck, do not do this. Don't buy Lenovo products anymore. And so now they're effectively coming out with signature PCs. And signature PCs, what that means is when it's a Windows machine. And of course, a lot of these problems, a lot of this ad tech that was built in, if you're using Linux, it wouldn't have been a problem. If you're using Linux on the very machine that, say, had this exploit, because these things ended up becoming security exploits, of course. And that's just the nature of the beast. The more software you put on, the more security exploits you have, right? Or the potential for exploits and, backdoors and all that. Right. So Lenovo said, and I don't know how exactly, I'm curious how this is going to shape up. Now, what took them so long to do it? They probably had to make their balance sheet look good and get through the stock of PCs that they had, that already had a lot of this stuff pre-installed and ready to go. How exactly are they going to be able to still sell, say, $250 computers when they're not putting all of this crapware onto their computers? Well, first off, I'm not convinced that they're going to sell any computers for $200. I'm not convinced that they're going to necessarily be going that route. And if they do, maybe it will just be Chromebooks that they will sell at, say, the sub $300 level. Lenovo, is doing some very interesting things. They have the Yoga book. This is the most futuristic computer, not the most powerful by any means, but the most futuristic computer you'll ever see in your life. It's the one that has that it doesn't have a keyboard. It has a keyboard, but it's just a flat surface that lights up. It's not like a physical keyboard. I mean, it's physical, but it's, again, it's not. What do they call it? A hollow keyboard. Really, really cool because it can convert into a drawing pad, in like a Wacom pad instead of just being a keyboard. I mean, just a slick machine. So I think Lenovo is really, I debate whether or not they're going to sell a lot of, say, sub $400 laptops anymore that aren't Chromebooks in any case. So maybe the Piper is finally going to get paid here. But I think that that's great. I'm glad to hear it, that they're going with Signature Edition, which Signature Edition means, again, it's just that pure Microsoft experience. Okay, it's the right move. Now, they also announced, and this kind of got leaked ahead because, of course, CES is coming up, the Computer Electronics Show. Now it's literally just CES, though, the acronym, or it's not really an acronym anymore. That they leaked ahead of it the ThinkPad, the Carbon X1, which, there used to be a decade ago, and this isn't really true in the past year or two, but a decade ago, the argument used to go that there are only two computers out there. There's ThinkPads and MacBooks. Everything else is substandard. Everything else is, kind of is in a different playing field. And I at the time, I certainly think that's true. I mean, up until very recently, I was using a ThinkPad almost exclusively, aside from like MSI. I mean, and again, that's a different playing field when you get into gaming machines. Obviously, Apple certainly not competing in that realm. So, the X1 Carbon has been kind of the competitor for like the MacBook Air and some others. And the new one that they talked about, holy shit, it's a 14-inch. The leaked specs that came out, it's a 14-inch. I mean, it has all the latest technologies. Of course, USB-C, the Thunderbolt stuff, blah, blah, blah. Has the, what is it, tri-band WiGig? That's kind of the new hotness in, like, that's even better than MIMO, where, MIMO is like a dual antenna setup. As far as a wireless card goes, this has tri-band, which, a lot of the latest routers has that built into it. This thing's really got it going on. Has a cellular card in it. I mean, just phenomenal. And stock, I think it has the 1080p screen, which again, I think is the absolute sweet spot. Now it does have fingerprint reader. I think the camera is also Windows Hello compatible, which I don't see as a good thing. Biometrics is a security flaw, not a security feature, in my opinion. And it's more than opinion. The case can get made very easily. In fact, listen to last week's episode of Sovryn Tech, episode 205, because I broke down how a lot of the introduction of new technologies, especially security technologies, like, say, Windows Hello, how these things can retroactively suddenly change all of the rights you thought you had, around other things, like how it can negate the Fifth Amendment protection rights of passwords. We talked all about it last week, so listen to that if you want to hear more. But I was really, really impressed. I mean, the hardware looked stunning for that Carbon X1, for that ThinkPad from Lenovo. So it sounds like they're kind of doing it right, and I think that they're feeling the heat because Dell and HP, especially HP, are making some of the best computers ever made, just bar none. So, you gotta, and that's amazing too. Like, because, I remember talking, probably 4 years ago with Sovryn Tech, which we're actually in our 5th year now, I guess. But 4 years ago, I remember talking about how, HP was actually splitting off into two businesses. I mean, they were in trouble. Everybody thought HP was just going to be dying by the wayside, but no, they did the split. They made the company smaller. Ooh, what's that? We talk about on Sovryn Tech a lot, but they made the company smaller, and then suddenly, holy shit, they're coming out with these, some revolutionary or at least very high-end, high-quality products that are giving people what they want. The Spectre line and all of that. I think that's fascinating in itself. But we're getting some great hardware in the PC space. Not talking about the OS whatsoever. Just saying in the PC space, we're really, really getting some great hardware, which is ironic because, now, Apple seems to be like, the MacBook, that Touch Bar and all that. Well, we've talked about that before on Sovryn Tech too, so we don't need to get into that. But hell of a time. So, speaking of new categories, because certainly Lenovo is in many ways, breaking well, they're breaking the mold in what computers can do, like with that yoga book and some of the other things that they're building right into, kind of their top of the line stuff. And just real quick, I do want to say it's not like the ThinkPad line ever had any problems with the crapware. It was always the lower end stuff. And of course, I explained to you why that is. It's because of adware, being subsidizing the lower price point of those devices. But they're really, they're breaking molds. Good for them. Now, speaking of breaking the mold or, of new categories, up and coming, boy, if you did not listen to yesterday's, I think it was episode 11, season 3, episode 11. If you didn't listen to yesterday's Sex and Science Hour with myself and the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, boy, we had a hell of an episode. We talked robots for a huge chunk of it, and I think conversations were had and points were made that I almost guarantee you don't get anywhere else. You just don't. It was a fascinating conversation, if I do say so myself. Of course, I'm a co-host on the show, so I'm kind of patting myself on the back, but I don't think you'll be disappointed that if you're a regular Sovryn Tech listener and you're not a regular Sex and Science Hour listener, please go give this episode a one time. And I think you'll be amazed. Some of the stories I would have loved to have just transposed and talked about them on Sovryn Tech because they were so good. But I think we said most of what needed to be said. So, do check that out. Season 3, episode 11 of Sex and Science Hour. And of course, when you go to sovryntech.com, that takes you right to the Patreon page where you can listen to not only, if you become a patron, you can, and it's just $1 a month. If you want to do more, awesome. Some people have got a lot of new patrons this week. Thank you for that. If you go there, if you're not a patron, you can still listen to every Sovryn Tech, what I call Sovryn Tech Prime episodes, like one that you're listening to now that comes out every Saturday totally for free. The main episodes where the main information gets out. You can listen to that, and I also put all the Sex and Science Hour episodes there as well. You can listen to them, stream them all right from that website. And if you're a patron, well, then you have a few hundred hours of other stuff to listen to as well. So jump on it, baby. Anyway, so yeah, do check out yesterday's Sex and Science Hour. That was interesting. Now, I do want to get into, boy, I've got a lot of stories to get into, but let's a couple points I want to bring up. One is going to very much lead into the other, and this will be our last bit, I think, for the foreplay. But I just want to say, so I have Sovryn Tech Solutions is a business that I operate where it's largely just me, but you can hire me to be a consultant for security consultant, cybersecurity consultant for your business, your organization, yourself, as an individual, whatever. Okay. And I'm not going to go into heavy details, but I'm just going to share with you. Okay. That I had a client who, this week, and then this is admittedly, this is a fairly high profile client. But I had a client that they were hacked. And it was how it happened. I'm going to explain to you how exactly it happened, or how I think it happened anyway. We're still not 100% sure how all this went down, but here's, and this is a subject that has been going around quite a bit. And in fact, on this week's, or was it last week's? Or no, yeah, I think it was this week's Q&A. On this week's on the Patreon Q&A episode, every Wednesday on Patreon, just for Patreon subscribers, donors. I do a Q&A where you can ask me a question, any question you want. Doesn't even have to be tech related, but a lot of them are. And I will go over it and I will cover it on the show. Okay. So I covered this in this week's Q&A, and it's pretty important. So I'm going to speak about it briefly here, but if you want a lot more details and solutions, you're going to want to listen to that Patreon episode. Something that's been going on, particularly in the Bitcoin community, is that there's a problem with second factor authentication or two-factor authentication or 2FA. And the problem is that a lot of people have their 2FA set to SMS. Now, as I said in the Patreon episode, if SMS is the only option you have for two-factor authentication, then it's better than nothing, right? But it is not perfect. If you can, you want to be using like the Google Authenticator app or the whatever authenticator app you want to be rocking that. Or if you can use a YubiKey. Okay, that's another option to consider is a YubiKey. And again, I'm not going to go into the details of what those are here. You can check out that episode if you like. Because what was happening is in the Bitcoin space is that a lot of people were, like social engineers and crackers. Again, hackers are heroes. Crackers are malicious actors. Okay. But so let's just say malicious actors were calling up, telecoms, calling up like Verizon, AT&T and others and saying, hey, could you port this number? I want to port this number over. I need it to go to this service. Could you take care of that for me? And they do a shit job of verifying if it was actually the person that held that phone number and that account. And so people would get access to the text messages sent to a certain phone number through this. And again, I go into much more detail in the Patreon episode. And in so doing, they'd get the second factor authentication code to be able to access, say, people's Bitcoin wallets at like blockchain.info or, blockchain.com or, a lot of web wallets or, whatever else, get access to their email, things like this. And that's been going on. And some people have lost a lot of money in doing so. Now, a client of mine, what happened here was, and this is the warning I want to give to listeners. Okay. Especially, this is particularly important if you are an AT&T customer. AT&T offers a few services, both of which I've actually, in the past on Sovryn Tech, I said are terrible fucking ideas. One of them is called number sync. Number sync is the idea that, say you have a smartwatch and you have a smartphone, that with number sync, you could have, with one phone number, you could answer that call on either device, just one phone number. Now you could say, well, I could set that all up with Google Voice. Of course you could. Great. Go ahead. Do that then. Okay. But AT&T offers this. Obviously, some people take advantage of it. Okay. Now there's problems with that because do you have absolute 100% control of every device that you decide to sign up for number sync? That's an issue. That's something we talked about when number sync first came out, and that was over a year ago. Then they also have something called messages backup and sync. And what this does is there's a website, and this works kind of like Google Voice, to where you can log into like messages.att.com or .att.com. It's not AT&T. And, you can log in with your info. And if you set this up, if you set your AT&T phone number, account up to receive this, you can actually text from this website. And thus you could text from and receive texts from any device, computer, tablet, phone, whatever, that you can get to that website with, and use your login credentials. Now, what I think happened is that this person, okay, this client of mine, was told effectively that, hey, I would like to, if you have AT&T, I would like to set up. It wasn't, I don't even know if the person asked if it was AT&T, but they just said, look, through AT&T, I want to set up a secure call with you. Kind of like something you would do on Signal, but not on Signal. And it said, I'm going to send you a code. You just let me know, or you're going to get a text message from AT&T with the code. You just send me that code and then we'll do whatever. And what I think happened is that code was to confirm, okay, to set up message backup and sync so that this person could have access to all the SMS two-factor authentication codes that would get sent to it. And then that malicious actor was able to get into email addresses and potentially into, all kinds of things, wallets and whatever else. And it's scary. I got the phone call and it's like, oh my God, what do I do? This is really terrifying. And first off, I want you to know about this. Now, my first bit of advice was, look, and I understand why people don't necessarily do this, because AT&T, as far as like having secure communications, AT&T, I don't know if they still offer it, but they used to offer what was called like Truecaller and True Messenger or something like that, but it was an actual app. It wasn't just something you'd receive a text message about. It was an actual app that you would download and install, and that would create, an encrypted, connection. Well, as encrypted as you want. We know how great of a relationship AT&T has with the U.S. government and probably governments all over the world. AT&T is just another alphabet soup organization, just like the NSA and CIA these days. But you could set that up. So, I mean, I'd understand where people would kind of be confused. So, but my first bit of advice was, and I would like it if all Sovryn Tech listeners would take this to heart, is that I said, look, if anybody wants to talk to you that securely, like if they want to have a really secure conversation, you tell them I use Signal and Signal only, and I will not use anything else. That's it. And everything's going to go through, is going to go through Signal. That little bit of business, probably could have kept this from happening. I do not blame my client for not knowing that, for not thinking that way and all that stuff. This shit's really, really complicated. In fact, honestly, and please, I'm not patting myself on the back because I'm not 100% sure that this is how it went down, but only because I read so much tech news was I able to, in just a matter of minutes, figure out in my own head just exactly what happened, because I knew, okay, you're an AT&T customer. They sent you an AT&T code, and it says messages in sync. It's like, aha, I know what happened. So I don't expect everybody to know that sort of thing. But then I suppose that's why Sovryn Tech is so goddamn popular, because, this is where you come to get some of your tech news, and I'm honored by that. But anyway, this happened, and, I said, going forward, if someone wants to have, that kind of a private conversation with you, long distance, you just say, I only use Signal. I will not use anything else you want, because it's just, there's too many issues otherwise, and it's too questionable, in my opinion, otherwise. That doesn't mean you yourself cannot go and use other, if you want to use Wire, or if that's a kind of a newer popular messaging app. If you want to use, I don't know, whatever you want to use, go ahead. But I'm just saying that, like, when it really counts, okay, think Signal, in my opinion. Now, I mean, everything else is largely been, things seem safe with the client. So that's good that things got mitigated. But, two things that need to happen, and I'll share this with you, is that with two-factor authentication, if you can help it, don't use SMS for two-factor authentication. Okay, there's technologies coming down the line like Squirrel and others, that'll hopefully solve a lot of this. But if you can help it, don't do it. The second thing is that use Signal for communications of that kind of caliber. Use it all the time, personally, in my opinion. But I know some people want to use other things, and I mean, I do too. Like when I talk to certain clients, I use Line Messenger, because that's popular in other parts of the world and all this. So keep those two things, in mind going forward, is I want to make people aware of that. Now, what's really cool is that, and I talked about this recently, was that with Signal, we talked about it last week, actually, that they said that they found out that at the very least in Egypt, the ability to use the Signal app was being censored and blocked. And Open Whisper Systems, the people that make Signal, Moxie, Marlin, Spike, and all, they said, well, we'll figure out a way to circumvent their censorship, their government censorship, and we will be releasing an update very soon. And literally, I think just yesterday, okay, this is getting recorded on December 31st, 2016. So December 30th, I believe, they pushed out that update. And the update specifically said, let's see here. Signal updated its version for Android. I'm not sure about the iOS version when they do this, but for Android, it's version 3.25.4. And it has a censorship circumvention for, updated censorship circumvention rules for Egypt and the UAE, censorship circumvention support for Oman and Cuba. And I mean, great, fucking awesome, good, yes, circumvent all this shit. I think that's wonderful. Now, how exactly are they doing that? That was one of my big questions I had last week. I'm still not exactly sure, but I just want you to know that update is out there. And I think that that's really cool, that they had that out there. I don't know if they're using some kind of tunneling, because that's one thing about Signal now. Actually, it's been true for about 3 years now, is that with Signal, it actually used to work over SMS. It technically doesn't work over SMS anymore. Now it works over the data plan. You can make it, and I want to bring this point up too, because I know some listeners have made me aware that they've had issues when they've used Signal. Like they haven't been able to receive certain messages and all this stuff. Okay. So you can set Signal as your default SMS app. Don't do that. Okay, now some people have said it's worked fine for them, and that's good. But myself and certainly a lot of others, because that I keep getting asked about this, and this is why I know to recommend it to people. For some people, the text messages don't work very well, especially if, where I've noticed there's a real problem is that if you are sending a text to somebody that doesn't use Signal as well, that they may not receive it. It's really, it's kind of funky how that works. And personally, I think it's good to have that separation. I think it's good to have Signal be Signal alone, and then have your SMS messages get handled in, in whatever messenger app you happen to, to use with it. If it's the stock one or, you name it, whatever you have. That's my personal opinion. If you don't have those problems, that, fantastic. I'm glad that you don't. But if you are new to Signal, I do recommend, especially if you're having troubles, detach it from SMS completely. And that should make a lot of those problems go away. But I've already heard quite a few anecdotes from people saying that they've had that issue. So there you have it. But yeah, it's time to get on this stuff. Two-factor authentication, use it, and try not to use it through SMS. If you want to have secure conversations, you use an open source system where, people are not going to screw you, by saying that they're doing it through AT&T or something. Just straight up use Signal. Okay. Don't take the chance. And so, there you go. Those are things to consider going forward. So anyway, that's enough of all of that. Why don't we finally, we're 40 minutes in. Why don't we finally get into our main story this week? And we're just going to let that bleed right into, into HackSec. And then we've got some other great stuff to talk about in this episode. So let's do it. And what we're going to start off with, is what I've called for years now, long before any of the other tech news was really recognizing just how powerful Amazon was. It was like episode 60 something when I mentioned this, and we're in episode 206, where I said it's the Amazon World Domination Tour. This is the company that is going to eat everything. This is the company that's just going to take the fuck over. And boy, Heidi, have they. And now it appears they're set to take over the skies. And this is the story from TechCrunch. I'll go ahead and break right into it, start reading here. Amazon patents show flying warehouses that send delivery drones to your door. This story is from, and you can see the patent. If you go to the show notes for episode 206, you'll be able to see this picture. It's really something. Anyway, this story is from December 28th, 2016. So just 3 days ago. This is fresh. We've known about Amazon's drone delivery ambitions since 2013, but patent filings from Amazon circulated today by CB Insights, Zoe Levitt, reveal more details about how the e-commerce titan could make drone deliveries work at scale, namely through, quote, airborne fulfillment centers, end quote. Yes, that's a warehouse in a Zeppelin. Woo. The airborne fulfillment centers, or AFCs, would be stocked with a certain amount of inventory and positioned near a location where Amazon predicts demand for certain items will soon spike. Now I'm going to stop there for a second. Yes, this sort of thing does kind of make sense in the idea that, is a lot of winter gear going to go on sale like crazy in the Northeast United States that maybe a blimp should be above, hovering above New York City or something to where it can drop all winter jackets down via drone or, skis or whatever. Yeah, of course, this is a very easy thing to predict. It's not that outlandish at all, but that doesn't mean there aren't parts of this that are. Let's keep going. Drones, reading on, including temperature-controlled models ideally suited for food delivery, could be stocked at the AFCs and sent down to make a precise, safe, scheduled, or on-demand delivery. An example cited in the filing was around a sporting event. If there's a big championship game down below, Amazon AFCs above could be loaded with snacks and souvenir sports fans crave. The AFCs could be flown close to a stadium to deliver audio or outdoor display advertising near the main event as well, the filing suggests. The patent reflects a complex network of systems to facilitate delivery by air. Now, I'm going to stop there for 1 second. There's a little more to the story. I am going to read it, but I'm going to stop right here. Do you see what I mean when I say Amazon World Domination Tour? Like, they're going to put, half the stadium employees out of work. They're going to put, a lot of blimp companies effectively out. Well, I mean, maybe they're going to, hire them to actually build the blimps and stuff like this. So I could see that. But they're going to just in the stadium example alone that Amazon effectively gave, you see where they are taking over advertising and, sports. I mean, what, biggest market in America, maybe in many ways, certainly as far as like entertainment goes. So they're taking over advertising in a very real sense. They're taking over. I mean, even just like, no more concession stands. We'll just drop down, your sodas, your hot dogs, and whatever else, right in the drone. Now, this is going to get at some sporting events. How exactly is this going to fucking work? Because you're probably going to have timed, moments in the game where you could actually, like ask for something via drone, because what happens if, the modern day Babe Ruth, points at a drone and hits it, right? At a baseball game. I mean, these things happen, stuff ends up out in the, out in the bleachers all the time. So, I mean, this isn't like perfect, but you can quickly see, yes, how this would work. And more importantly, you can quickly see how many categories in the economy that Amazon could instantly dominate if they did it. Let's read on more with the story. Again, the patent reflects a complex network of systems to facilitate delivery by air. Besides the airborne fulfillment centers and affiliated drones, the company has envisioned larger shuttles that could carry people, supplies, and drones to the AFCs or back to the ground. Using a larger shuttle to bring drones up to the AFC would allow Amazon to reserve their drones' power for making deliveries only. Of course, all of these elements would be connected to inventory management systems and other software and remote computing resources managed by people in the air or on the ground. The filing also reveals that the shuttles and drones, as they fly deliveries around, could function in a mesh network, relaying data to each other about weather, wind speed, and routing, for example, or beaming ebook content down to readers on the ground. We reached out to Amazon to learn more about the progress on this concept and whether or not they have an actual date for when they might launch or even just test their first airborne fulfillment center. The company did not immediately reply to inquiries, and there are no updates on that so far. Now, there's a lot to unpack about this story, and especially for one so short. But I want to talk for a moment about the mesh networking thing, because this is really, really important. First off, understand that years ago, when, say, on Sovryn Tech, and not just on Sovryn Tech, but in, hacker conferences around the world, when mesh networking was being talked about as a thing that people need, to get on board with, to defeat censorship, to have control of their devices, to have local, internets where people could, yes, multiple internets, not using the same infrastructure as the big bad internet either. Okay, where people, could communicate more freely and, perhaps trade and do all kinds of things, have their own little, Silk Road or Open Bazaar running on a local level, shit like this, right? Okay, using whatever cryptocurrency they want to use. That this is something that is viable, it can happen, it's real. And Silicon Valley never talked about it until, oh shit, suddenly, wow, isn't that interesting that the new version of Bluetooth, what is it? Is it not 4.2, but I think it's going to be Bluetooth 5.0. Bluetooth 5.0 is specifically designed to handle mesh networking. And, now that IoT is a thing, that, the Internet of Things is a thing. Oh, suddenly, yeah, we want mesh networks, blah, 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 blah. Now, why did this suddenly become such a buzzword in Silicon Valley? And I'll tell you why, because they are trying to fix, much why a lot of companies were excited about blockchains. Even though I think they're flawed in their thinking, they're trying to fix an inherent problem with when you get to a certain scale as far as a business goes. This problem is one that I think will plague this whole idea that Amazon has. And there's more to say, don't worry. Okay. The problem is that really with any big business, now I'm not saying, okay, look, I'm an anarchist. All right. My personal belief is that when you ever end up with an actual freed market, that companies the size of Amazon, Google / Alphabet, good old AlphaGoog, Apple, and others, they really won't be able to stay that size because they won't be able to compete with the little guy that is no longer being encumbered by the big guys, lobbyists, and regulations coming down from the government. Of course, it's corporatism. All right. It's that unholy alliance between the two, between, corporations and the government itself, big business and government working in conjunction. Okay. Without that, the little guy will wipe the floor with you. Okay. Now this gets into a bunch of Hayekian stuff. I'm not going to go there necessarily, but I just want to say is that here's the problem is that regardless of how you feel about that, because there's still some people who are of, kind of a free market way of thinking that, oh no, big businesses will happen. They'll be order of the day. This is just how it goes. I'm not saying that big businesses existing within a completely freed market, again, without government regulations or the capability to lobby, etc. I'm not saying that that's somehow unethical for those to exist. However, I am saying that it's dumb and it's a terrible idea for the consumer as well as the business. And the reason I say that is that I think it's been proven, especially in the past few years, it's been proven over and over and over again. Target, Bank of America, go down the list. All right. Or how about one of the best ones, Sony Pictures of America? What happens is that when a company gets to a certain size, it becomes impractical, nay, impossible to secure the data that company goes through. Now, this is bringing up this point is interesting when, compared to what I brought up last week in last week's Sovereign Tech in episode 205, where I talked about this new concept running around Silicon Valley called data minimization. Data minimization is the idea that as a company, as a service, whatever, tech company, service, blah, 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 you don't want to collect all of that data about a person. You want to collect as little data as possible about your consumer, because if that data ever leaks, you are held responsible for that data. What happened with that data? You, the company, not the consumer. And so you don't want that responsibility because it could get costly really fucking fast. Say if a bad actor goes after your company, cracks into it or, whatever ends up happening. So now we know with say the Sony Pictures crack or hack that with Sony Pictures, they lost tons of movies. It was a clusterfuck. There's leaked documents about what the MPAA was saying about Google. It was huge. It was a massive crack. Or I'd almost half want to say it's a heroic act, but but that's another story. You'd have to listen to when that happened. I talk about that in the episode. But when that went down, that proved the point. And some of the best security researchers in the world, including personal hero Steve Gibson, he said it straight up. He said, look, I cannot, as somebody who's been in the security business forever and who keeps track of the stuff, and he runs the Security Now podcast, which is, like in college, they teach from the Security Now podcast, for fuck's sake. Okay. Not that I'm saying college is a good thing, but he said, I cannot imagine how you would even protect the data in a company that size. It's just, there's too many holes. There's too many exploits or, too many potential exploits. You're screwed when you get to that size. Okay. And so I think it's true for Amazon. This is a very initial problem with this whole concept is that when you get to the size to where Amazon is sending their blimps, their AFCs or whatever, and their drones to all of these different stadiums, sending them perhaps all over the world. And there's reasons to send it all over the world. Having an AFC in Mexico would solve a lot of problems in Mexico. I'm being straight. It really would. Because that's one of the big problems in Mexico is you've got, you have post office problems. You have delivery problems. Yeah, there's businesses that try to circumvent it, but understand, Amazon would kill it there, if they sent, a few AFCs into that country. But this is a big problem. Doing that all over the world. This is the ultimate in scale. And how are you going to secure this shit? You can't. And we know that. There is no way to really secure it. So this is why it's interesting that things like blockchain technology and mesh networking comes in, because I think mesh networking is the idea that these AFCs, and I'm just guessing here, it's not said in the article, or in the patent really, as far as I know, is that AFCs will operate on their own little mesh network, and they're going to have very particular points where they communicate with, Amazon on a larger scale. Okay. And, that way that's trying to mitigate this problem of, if you have a central point of failure, which would be the controls for all of these AFCs, there's the potential for something really, really bad to happen. And and if they're automating the drones, why the fuck not automate the entire AFC, make the whole goddamn thing robotic? And they could do that, because this is something I am going to pat myself in the back. I called this, okay? Amazon's we're talking the early aughts. They invested in certain robotics companies. And a lot of people, I remember like it was yesterday, a lot of people said, this is insane. What the fuck are they buying into? Like, this is crazy. This is the worst investment Amazon's ever done, buying into these robotics companies. But what they ended up doing is they pioneered and created an incredibly efficient warehouse system that was completely automated and roboticized. And it works really, really well. Okay. But again, part of the reason it works really well is that, there's still humans involved to a degree, and also they're not exactly hot targets. You're not exactly going to be able to control, one of these robotic, forklifts effectively and bring out a ton of, PlayStation 5s whenever they come out and get away with it. That's just not going to happen. As to where the drones, very different story. They could potentially be a longer way from home to where someone, maybe could take advantage of that sort of thing. Anyway, they could automate the whole thing. The loading, the entire AFC could be a completely automated process, no humans involved whatsoever. But that leads to the great danger is that, to some degree, yes, you could social engineer humans, but you probably couldn't social engineer humans to where they're going to nosedive one of these things at a sporting event. Or who knows what. And I'm going to a very extreme case. I'm aware of that. You don't need to go to extreme cases to see where there'd be genuine problems with this sort of thing. Add into this, what's the new store that Amazon's doing? Amazon Go? Is that what it's called? I think it's Amazon Go, where, this is that demo that they showed off where you just walk into the store and there's no cashiers, there's nothing, and you go and you buy things. They're going to automate entire grocery stores. Then they're going to automate completely delivery. They're going to automate, effectively the post office. Really, that's what this is going to, shape up to be probably in the future, to where everything just gets loaded up. It's all being done by robotics. Now, this could get into a much larger conversation, but there's a direction I want to take this in before we go there. And that is, and then we have another Amazon story that's going to scare the fuck out of you. Okay. This one isn't too scary, but it's bad enough. What I think is really going on here with this, like, why even think of this idea? What's the deal? Why not just set up, various, more, I don't want to say outposts. What's the word I'm looking for? Outlets. Thank you. Outlets where you could just launch the drones from and all this, for varying things. Well, again, this is a very attractive thing because the AFCs could double as advertisers, as advertisement, and that's going to be some primo fucking advertising, especially if and when they launch. They're going to make a real mint on that from a lot of companies. But you have that advantage. There's a lot of advantages to it, instead of doing it that way. But here's the thing is that I think even with this idea of just doing it through outlets, I think what's going to end up happening is that, the world is in some ways, and let me finish this. Okay. The world is in some ways turning into Japan. Okay. Now, when you go to Japan, or it's turning into Israel, where when you go to either of those countries, the buildings you have to build way up, because on Japan, it's an island. You only have so much land. In Israel, well, you can understand why they only have so much land. And so, you keep building up. And as growth is the primary metric, like everything, we just got to have more growth. We got to have more customers. And certainly Amazon is a company that can, really show value, frankly, to customers, in a very real sense, especially in the status matrix we live in. They eventually, these tech companies are just straight up, they're going to run out of land that they can, lay this stuff out on. How many more server farms can the world really handle? Or, can you really put on land, I should say, not the world, but on land? Yeah, eventually you're going to run into problems. Now, this is interesting when tack on a story from, I think, earlier this year, where we talked about on Sovryn Tech, we talked about how Microsoft was testing off the coast of, I believe, the Northwest. They were testing out underwater server farms where literally you were dropping servers into the water. Now, we talked about the potential ecological problems with that, and I think they're legit and real, heating up. I mean, there's a whole, artificial reefs and, a bunch of these issues that I think are very, very legit to talk about, as much as I like the idea of how do we make things work better underwater, because, I kind of agree with the old Sequest DSV tagline for beneath the surface lies the future. There's some truth to that. But Amazon clearly sees they're sort of going in the other direction. They're saying, well, above the surface, in the sky is the future. And so they're making a bunch of helicarriers, effectively, agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. be damned. They're saying, okay, yeah, eventually we're going to run out of room. There's going to be problems with, where exactly, what's the fly zone for drones. If they can come down instead of having to fly, laterally, where they could be problematic for, all different kinds of, all different kinds of obstacles, from, power lines, street lamps, all these different things. They just fly down and then go back up. That creates a very, very different, kind of approach that might be a little more feasible. So this is really part of a larger, this is the direction I really want to take this, I think this is part of a larger conversation and a larger tactic by tech giants and by Silicon Valley to, even though, I know Amazon's by Seattle, so is Microsoft and Nintendo of America, blah, blah. It's an attempt by them to not rely, A, upon real estate, and B, rely upon the amount of real estate, whatsoever. And maybe this might be good for taxes. Like, are you going to tax them for, for the blimp in the sky? I mean, I'm sure there's probably a blimp tax somewhere, but it's probably less than having, a 2,000 square foot, or, well, that's small, but, just having, a gigantic distribution center somewhere, and building those over and over again. And certainly it's got to be cheaper to build, a Zeppelin than it is to, build a bunch of gigantic brick and mortar buildings. So this is, this is really, really interesting. And, again, also this ends the reliance, and this is going to be interesting how this ever shapes up. This ends Amazon's reliance upon UPS, FedEx, and the U.S. Post Office, and, postal services around the world, which, again, like I said, in some areas are terrible. And like in Mexico, this would certainly be a huge advantage, right? But understand that that's what this is really about. This is about potentially taking over other categories, which I could see happening. And then, not just that, but also solving kind of the we're running out of land problem. And who knows? Maybe in the future, they'll have AWS, servers on these fucking blimps. It's going to be intriguing, to see how that all shapes up. And I'm a little, there's a part of me, so I don't, on one hand, I really don't like this. I think there's another direction that I would have a lot of this stuff go. Certainly, I'm not one for big business. But on the other hand, there's a touch of romanticism in this, I have to admit. And that is that, when you watch a lot of classic movies, kind of like Metropolis, a lot of classic science fiction films, in the black and white days, as they would say, the skies were loaded. The skies had Zeppelins everywhere, and there were planes everywhere, and everything was flying around, blah, blah. It was just, there was so much going on above you. And I kind of envisioned that, holy shit, we're going to end up with that future where the skyscrapers are going to be, it's going to look like Coruscant from Star Wars. They're going to be to the roof and, to the toposphere. I don't know. They're going to be ridiculously high, and there's just going to be these, this air traffic, this incessant air traffic everywhere. So that's what kind of my take on that. I think it's interesting. Are they actually ever going to do it? Maybe not, because of course, President-elect Donald Trump has already threatened, even though he's been going back on just about everything he's ever cared to say. He has already threatened to go after Amazon with antitrust laws. So maybe this will never actually come into fruition. But, just because, wow, how much more dominant are you going to become when you take over advertising and a lot of these other categories? So, but now something that's not so romantic, that's our next bit of story for HackSec. So let's get into this. But make no mistake, we're still dealing with Amazon here. And this is from Engadget. And actually, some Sovryn Tech listeners sent this in. The Sovrynati, the Sovryn Tech sweaties, as I like to call them. And I really appreciate it. I mean, a lot of people sent this story in. Like, and again, this is the story that I mentioned earlier on in the show where I said, people were saying, Stallion, you just got vindicated. In what you said. And so let me read the title here for you again from Engadget. And this is from December 27th, 2016. So also very fresh. Amazon obviously making a lot of news. They always make a ton of news over the holiday season, but here we go. Police, whoo, that's bad already. Police seek Amazon Echo data in murder case. The company declined to do so, but the case raises bigger questions about IoT privacy. So holy shit, this could have been in our Internet of Things segment, but I actually have a whole other story for that. So this is going to be for HackSec. And let's read here. Amazon's Echo devices and its virtual assistant are meant to help find answers by listening for your voice commands. However, police in Arkansas want to know if one of the gadgets overheard something that can help with the murder case. According to the information, authorities in Benton, the news site, authorities in Bentonville issued a warrant for Amazon to hand over any audio or records from an Echo belonging to James Andrew Bates. Bates is set to go to trial for first-degree murder for the death of Victor Collins next year. Amazon declined to give police any of the information that the Echo logged on its servers, but it did hand over Bates's account details and purchases. Police say they were able to pull data off of the speaker, but it's unclear what info they were able to access. Due to the so-called always-on nature of the connected device, the authorities are after any audio the speaker may have picked up that night. Sure, the Echo is activated by certain words, but it's not uncommon for the IoT gadget to be alerted to listen by accident. Police say Bates had several other smart home devices. All right, I want to talk about what those are. They're the more interesting aspect of the story, but I want to take a second to talk about this, about, what audio could they possibly get? Okay, so to be clear, that there is, the Amazon Echo is technically always on, because it's always listening to hear the catchphrase, hey, Alexa, whatever. Okay. And if I set yours off, that's on you, not on me. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's recording at all times. And you can kind of test that it's not, because this thing doesn't really have a gigantic hard drive in it to store tons of audio files, right? And it doesn't. And you could use something, like Wireshark or, some kind of network test to see if suddenly there's a massive influx of, or outflux, I guess, of data going out, say to Amazon. If, from your Amazon Echo, you'd be able to see that. In fact, I mean, if you look, with a fine tooth comb, effectively, you can see when the Amazon Echo is actually sending something back and forth, specific IP address, all that. So yeah, it's not sending everything, right? But there are points, and the Amazon Echo does by its very nature has to be sure, okay, when exactly is the human done talking to me? When did they start talking? I mean, there is going to be some kind of extra audio by default. There's it's the nature of the beast. But here's the thing though, is that all this data, that is getting sent up there. Now, I mean, Google Now, or whatever they're calling it, Google Assistant, you can see all of this, and you can actually, there's a web portal you can go to where you can delete all of the audio that it records. And I mean, if you check it out, it's creepy at first, because it's like, wait a minute, it recorded me saying all that. And those are just the things that it kind of lets you know is out there. And then also you're trusting Google that they actually deleted what you had said and blah, 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 which, did they really? So yeah, the Amazon Echo isn't always sending stuff out, and there have been stories that some call sensational, others say are pretty well founded, where say somebody was talking about something and then suddenly the Amazon homepage is showing you what you were talking about, but you never addressed your Echo in the first place. And people get, rightfully so, they get very, skeeved out by that. And I think that's completely understandable. I mean, this really is, let's be clear here, regardless of when or how it's recording, this is a plugged in, always on device that has 7 microphones on it and a gigantic speaker as well, which even if something went wrong with the microphones, could be reversed to work as a microphone itself. Okay. This is a gigantic microphone that you have placed. Some people have multiple ones in their home. I mean, saying that, how that doesn't turn people off, I don't get it. And I know the argument. People say, well, you already have a smartphone, so you're screwed anyway. Yeah, you know what? Honestly, that's kind of true. Laptop, if you use the laptop with that kind of thinking, that wouldn't be true, because the laptop, you have a lot more control of what you can do, and you can start splicing wires and all this shit, right? So yes, there is some truth to this, but there's ways to turn off. There's ways to turn off the Echo too. It's adding in more, and it's really, I don't want to get into a huge conversation about the Echo, but regardless, is that whatever it was recording, the fact is that Amazon, or the government, the authorities, as it were, the police in Arkansas, were wanting this data. And Amazon did have it to give. Kudos to them for not handing it over, as far as we know. But it is obviously a place where government agencies, government enforcers where authorities are looking to somehow spy on you or track you. And that's what I said that this would end up getting used for. Now, I know there's a big conversation around this, is that, okay, well, yeah, so the Amazon Echo clearly infringes upon my privacy, but I choose that. Okay, fine. You didn't choose the police to ask Amazon for it, though. So in some ways, you're not really choosing to give up your privacy. You are, but not to the extent that I think you're comfortable with. Certainly the choice for you is not there. The argument kind of goes is that really the problem isn't the lack of privacy. The problem is that it can be used, the lack of privacy, what gets recorded about you, what is learned and data collected about you can be used against you in a court of law. That's where the problem is. I agree with that to an extent, that yes, that is a genuine issue, is that, okay, fine, you don't want your privacy, but that doesn't also mean that you want everything being recorded about you able to be used against you, perhaps even retroactively. Right? Because, as far as I understand this story, the police are just asking for the broad swath, give us everything. And yeah, I get it. In a criminal investigation, you kind of, it could be premeditated for years. And so you got to know it all. Now let's move on to the rest of this with, the rest of the internet of target. I'm sorry, the internet of spy device. The internet of things in this guy's house. Okay, this guy Bates, his house, Bates, oh boy. Anyway, reading on here, police say Bates had several other smart home devices, including a water meter. Oh, this is where it gets great. That piece of tech shows that 140 gallons of water were used between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. the night Collins was found in Bates's hot tub. Investigators allege the water was used to wash away evidence of what happened off of the patio. The examination of the water meter and the request for stored Echo information raises a bigger question about privacy. At a time when we have any number of devices tracking and automating our habits at home, should that information be used against us in criminal cases? Which gets to the point that I just made. Bates's attorney argues that it shouldn't. Quote, you have an expectation of privacy in your home, and I have a big problem that law enforcement can use the technology that advances our quality of life against us, end quote. Now, defense attorney Kimberly Weber said, I'm going to stop right there for a second. Hold on. Quality of life and standard of living are two very different things. Okay. Now, yes, the standard of living is increased potentially by IoT, but that does not mean quality of life is improved. I disagree with that wording. In fact, I would say quite the opposite, and the proof is in the pudding right here. Reading on, of course, there's also the question of how reliable information is from smart home devices. Accuracy can be an issue for any number of IoT gadgets. However, an audio recording would seemingly be a solid piece of evidence if released. Just as we saw with the quest to unlock an iPhone in the San Bernardino case, it will be interesting to see how authorities and the companies who make smart home devices work out the tension between serving customers, maintaining privacy, and pursuing justice. There is an update here. An Amazon spokesperson gave gave Engadget the following statement on the matter, quote, Amazon will not release customer information without a valid and binding legal demand properly served on us. Amazon objects to overbroad, or otherwise inappropriate demands as a matter of course, end quote. As a refresher, Echo only captures audio and streams it to the cloud when the device hears the word Alexa, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we got that. And of course, microphones on an Echo can be manually turned off at any time. And that's the end of the story. So, I mean, that's nice, but really Amazon's just saying, look, you're going to have to bring a warrant. And again, how hard is it for fucking, government agents, for goons to get a warrant? It's not hard at all. But this case really should bring a lot of pause if you're the kind of person who's getting that new Nest thermostat, getting that smart water meter and all this stuff, because I mean, and we're just getting a glimpse at what the amount of data that they are using to collect to create this kind of, this case against a potential murderer. Now, I don't want, I'm not here to protect murderers. I'm not, please. Okay. I mean, you go using lethal force against other humans. I've got a problem. Okay, no matter what you think you're doing. And that's not the point here. The point is that, like, look at how much, I mean, just the water meter was effectively proving that this guy drowned the person or got rid of evidence and all this stuff. You got to understand, this is a great analogy would be, say, Facebook. Okay, when you started, say you were a college student in the aughts, okay, say you're a college student in 2007, when Facebook kind of hit it. You shared all those pictures because you're like, this is just for college kids. This is just in college. It's not going to go any further. And, you shared all that pictures of, your weekend bender or, when you were playing beer pong and, you ended up grabbing whatever and, you're upside down and vomiting and, however that all shaped up, right? These crazy, crazy pictures. Then suddenly, come 2008, 2009, or 2010 more particularly, I guess, suddenly, oh no, everybody can be on Facebook. Oh, okay. Come 2011, 2012, employers want to look at and will ask you for your passwords for your Facebook account. They want to see what you're doing on Facebook if you're going to get hired at this firm, Jack. But you didn't think back in 2007, oh shit, well, I'll just share these pictures. It won't be a problem. 5, however many years later, oh shit, it's a problem. And this is the thing, is that fucking people are not thinking long term enough. Okay. You're going for these really like the short term, and I get it. Everybody wants a little bit of happiness, and happiness, comes from a 5-second cum, a cookie, maybe a chocolate chip cookie or something like this. Or maybe it comes from the fact that from your smartphone, holy shit, I can close my blinds. Woo! Happiness. That is happiness for me. I have pursued and I have found. Woo! I get it. But what's the long-term implications of this? And this speaks, again, across the board, not just about IoT, but about all kinds of things. Okay, to where, I know lots of people, very principled people, very liberty-minded people that are super intelligent, smarter than I am, some of them, not many. And they will say to me, okay, fine, I hand over my privacy. I don't give a shit. But I don't think we're thinking long-term enough as to what are the consequences of handing over your privacy is or are. What are the consequences of this? Because they might not take shape until the police are coming after you and saying, hey, Jack, you poured 140 gallons of water. What did you do with all that water, baby? Woo! Right? We have to think long-term, really long-term, especially since, personally, I think, the generation now, we're not going to die. Potentially, we're not going to die. Woo-hoo-hoo. Hey, all right. Speaking of long-term, think about perhaps your web presence, okay? What can you do for your web presence to guarantee its security and maybe working with a company that kind of understands your outlook on things? Maybe you're like me, maybe you're an anarchist or you're a freedom lover overall. And, you're concerned about companies not respecting, like we're talking about here, not respecting your privacy, whatever else. I want to tell you about a company, especially if you have a website, okay, a web host that is going to take care of you and that really understands. They love to work with activists. They love to work with people that get the ideas of freedom. You want this to be your web host. It's agoristhosting.com, AGORIST hosting.com. They are the best. Okay, they're going to give you a level of customer service that you have not experienced before, because these are guys that believe in the free market, and they know that a big part of that is having a lot of honesty, okay, having a lot of transparency, and being consumer facing. This is what AgoristHosting.com offers you. And, speaking of how much they love the free market, they have such incredible features. If you want to get a business started on OpenBazaar, trust me. Please, we talk about trust. What do you trust? The Golden Stallion. Okay, these are the people you want to work with if you want to do anything on OpenBazaar as far as running your own business. They're going to take care of you. Okay, they're going to give you better features than OpenBazaar itself gives you. It's phenomenal. Okay, Bicontinental backups. They got your hookup, baby. AgoristHosting.com, and I thank them so much for supporting Sovryn Tech. Now let's get back to the show.
Internet of Targets.
Woo, barely got to breathe on that one, baby. All right. Internet of Targets. I mean, what a beautiful segue, because we're just talking about, kind of one of the ultimate, really scary terror stories in the history of the Internet of Targets, of course, is just a funny word for Internet of Things. Now, the Internet of Things, I love using this phrase. I want people to get this in their head when they talk about it, okay? Remember this. What does the S stand for in Internet of Things? Well, it stands for security, but guess what? There's no S or what does the S stand for in IoT, I should say? What does the S stand for in IoT? Stands for security, but there's no S in IoT. Woo! Of course, in the term Internet of Things, there's an S at the end of the things, but you get it, right? All right. So we've got another doozy of a story. And of course, this is a new segment that I've created. And the entire purpose of this segment is to really, I want to, just to drive it home. And if the last story wasn't enough to get you to think twice about buying into all of these Internet of Things devices, all of these IoT devices, I don't know what will, but I'm going to keep talking about these stories to hopefully highlight what look, this is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. And maybe it's a market category that could just die off. And that happens, folks. These things can become either just incredibly niche to where they're meaningless only to the people that absolutely are obsessed with them, and then probably they wouldn't get developed because, whatever company's on board with them isn't going to be making money, or just it completely, goes the way of the dodo. And that is absolutely a goal. I'll say it here. It is a goal of Sovryn Tech as a show and everything that I do, that Internet of Things dies as a category. That it just goes away. We don't want it. As bad as I don't want identity either. We don't want this to. We want this to go away too, or identity systems, I should say. Anyway, getting off topic there. Let's get on topic. And this is a story where I never really expected anything like this to happen. So let's read it. This is actually from Android Police, a website that I really appreciate. And it's so smart. This man's smart television with Google TV caught some malware, and now it's bricked. We could stop at the headline. A television with Google TV built into it, which that's their television platform, caught some malware, and now it's bricked. Tells the story. Holy shit. What do you mean a TV got fucking bricked? Well, let's read it. And this story is from December 27th, 2016 as well. It's a wonderful day for IoT, December 27th. You know what's great, reading the story? Having lots of streaming content available on your TV. What's not so great is when your quest to stream content results in ransomware bricking your TV. One fellow on Twitter shared the story of an LG TV that caught some nasty malware, and now it's apparently useless. Perhaps technology has gone too far. I know what you're thinking. Don't LG's TVs run WebOS? They do now. But a few years back, LG sold some sets equipped with the now defunct Google TV. That's what this particular TV was running. According to one Darren Cathune, this family member installed an app of some sort to stream movies. The specifics aren't clear, but it appears the app in question was actually malware. The TV is now locked to a fake FBI notice screen informing the user that illegal content was found, blah, 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 pay money. This is known as ransomware, a more sophisticated version of which is still terrorizing Windows PCs by encrypting important files and demanding payment in bitcoins for the decryption keys. That's a long story, but yes, that happens. That's a crypto locker and all that, right? In this case, the malware, probably a variant of the old FBI lock package, seems to have been granted administrator access to the lock screen. Unknown sources must have been enabled as well. Quote, family members' TV is bricked by Android malware. LG won't disclose factory reset. Avoid these smart TVs like the plague. Now, Stallion stepping in for a second. Guess what? You can't. In fact, just recently, this house might have equipped itself with a television, and and I tried. Yeah, 30 minutes ago. You're getting live buy-in here. I tried like hell to find and you'd think it'd be cheaper. Like, you'd think it'd be inexpensive just to find a little 30-inch television, nothing serious. Doesn't have to be 4K. In fact, I don't even necessarily like 4K. 720p is good for me. And just something, it doesn't have to have any apps. It just needs to have, it'd be nice if it had a USB port and an HDMI cable on it. It's all it needs to do. If I want to connect apps with it, I'll get a Shield TV or, a Chromecast or something along those lines. I'm not saying I'd buy those, but I'll handle the smart stuff. The TV just needs to be a dumb fucking screen. And you can't really buy that. The best thing you could do is like buy a monitor, but even some of those are getting loaded with stuff, right? I mean, and then, there's a whole slew of other problems that, that come along with that. But, you can't buy a dumb TV anymore. I mean, like, I don't even know. Granted, I haven't necessarily been into Best Buy, really, or I haven't looked in their TV section anyway in a long time, and maybe I need to do that. But I'm curious, like, okay, do we have any screens here that aren't smart in some form or fashion? I mean, even like, you'd think that, I could buy a projector, right? Maybe I could buy a nice projector, which I love projectors. I think they're great. I'll buy a nice projector, and that projector, maybe that won't have anything built into it because it's just a projector. No. Most projectors now come with Android built into them. Woo, yikes. And much the problem like happened with this TV, software doesn't get updated. Like, it'll be a version of Android. It'll be like version 4.2, which again, there's an argument to be made for using Android 4.2 because after 4.2, because after 4.2, Google really, sunk their teeth into Android and changed a lot of the abilities, a lot of the more open abilities of what used to be the very open source Android, operating system that companies could take advantage of to do custom things with audio and video and all of this. So I'm not saying that I get it why companies use Android 4.2, but at the same time, you have massive security flaws, and these companies usually they're not Microsoft, they're not Google, they're not Apple. They are not going to update these things. I mean, it's tough enough for companies like Lenovo or Asus, or, think of some of the bigger manufacturers that do very well for themselves. It's tough enough for them to even update, say, their phones or their devices with the kind of the latest and greatest. So that's problematic. And this is the other thing too, like Google TV. I mean, now there's Android TV. That's probably dying because everything's going to, Chromecast 4K and all this shit, right? Like, this is a whole other thing, is that because a lot of these things aren't really open source, you couldn't, even if you wanted to independently solve the problem, you can't, because Google's not going to support it anymore. LG, as in the case of this story, isn't going to support it anymore, but you're fucked. You can't, even if you had the technical ability, you could not solve this problem because it's all closed source code. I mean, are you going to spend all that time reverse engineering your TV? Of course not. As to where if this shit was, open, if the hardware was open and the software was open, you could even install entire other operating systems, say, onto the television. Of course, at that point, how is it different from a computer? Well, good question. I'm going to read just the last bit here. The ransomware is demanding $500 to unlock the device, but because this is a TV, there's no way to navigate the app, nor is there apparently any way to get into safe mode. There's safe mode in televisions? A careful observer may also notice that the app is sideways, so someone did something they should not have done. Actually, probably several things. The kicker is that LG has no protocol in place to fix this. The only solution offered is a $340 service visit. For a TV that's already getting old, it might make more sense to just get a new one that isn't running Google's failed and outdated TV platform, which again, the consumer has no control over that. Reading on, you probably don't have to avoid smart TVs like the plague, but don't go around installing strange apps on them. No, I think you need to avoid smart TVs like the plague. Let it be a separate device, okay, that handles all the smart shit and that a specific company deals with. Not having a fucking monolithic company like LG where everything, and Google too, where everything's getting baked in. Have it be something, have it be, maybe one of the little, not so little guys, but more category specific guys like Roku or even Sony, right? I mean, even though they're kind of a big company, but they're very particular with their, what is it, there's that TV device that they have it's not a PlayStation, but it connects. Anyway, I know the name. I can't think of it. So this is a huge fucking issue. Like, not okay. And like I said, the solution really, in my opinion, is to just stop it with these fucking smart TVs. Okay, I mean, and it goes beyond this. I've brought this example up so many times. When you buy a Samsung TV today, when you go to turn up the volume, a fucking ad pops up and you can't turn it off, and you're not going to add on an ad blocker to that because you don't have control of that code. Okay, an ad pops up above the fucking volume bar. Baby, you probably already paid $2,000 for that TV. How much more adware do you fucking need in that thing? This is crazy. There's no point to that. I mean, and it's not even a great idea for the economy. A great idea for the economy is to allow, your TV to become like a platform that people can add onto. Not an app platform where this kind of shit happens, but maybe more like a hardware platform. Really, let's do division of labor here and all this. Like, there's ways to do these things where it doesn't work. Just like, in the past story, or in the previous story before the Internet of Things or Internet of Target segment, with the Echo, there's probably a way that you could do the Echo to where, like, you could encrypt that voice data and a bunch of other stuff to where the government could ask for it and you'd be handing them gibberish. You could, yeah, sure, here, fine, have fun with gibberish. But they're not going to do that because Amazon wants that fucking data. And they're probably getting a government subsidy to hand it over. I don't trust that they didn't just not hand it over. I really don't trust them for that. Especially when Jeff Bezos, went to Washington. Mr. Bezos goes to Washington, right? Oh, just recently that big meeting that I could talk about that, but we'll maybe another time. So I think that this is absolutely nuts. And if you told somebody, 10 years ago, you said, hey, be careful, your TV is going to get malware. They'd be like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? And in fact, it's funny too. I remember when I was younger, that there was a lot, and they had a bunch of different names for this. A lot of them are escaping me right now. But there was the concern that, much like in the book and movie of 1984, where the TV, not only, you didn't just watch TV, the TV also watched you, and Big Brother kept an eye on you. There was that big concern that a lot of people had. I heard the conversations growing up in the 80s and the 90s where people would say, yeah, what if they can see you through the TV? I don't trust some of the technology that they're putting in there. This is a really big problem. Well, now, They really can track you through the television, through the use of apps and through a bunch of other things. And now you can get malware on it, and who knows what the fuck else that they're putting onto these things. It's funny, almost not all, but so many of these concerns from 30, 40 years ago and probably even older, where people said, look, if you put that if you put this technology into this technology, it is going to get abused by tyrannical forces on this planet. And, I heard it and people said, no, that's crazy. That's not happening. That's conspiracy theory. And now it's all coming to fruition. I don't think people appreciate, and this is going to be a running theme with this segment, you do not appreciate just how much control and how much, privacy and I mean, which ends up, with control because, again, retroactively, things could be held against you that you did, based upon your IoT data. I don't think people appreciate yeah, just how much control you're handing over with just this one category alone. And you could say the smartphones are just as bad. Sure. But the smartphone doesn't necessarily have to tell the cops that 140 gallons, or however much water, was getting poured out and all this stuff. I mean, it can, but you don't have to connect everything like that. I mean, the smartphone can in many ways really, go as far as you want it to go and not so far as you want it to go. So where Internet of Things really usually doesn't have a user interface. It has one speed, or maybe it has two speeds, walk and kill, right? No, this category has to go. This is ridiculous. And then for the service call to cost as much as probably a far superior television. What a fucking racket. This is so not consumer facing, which again, that was the real dream in the 90s. I know, the internet and computers in general, enabling individuals in so many ways, giving one person the power of 100 effectively, because it was also consumer facing. It's like, yeah, everything's going to be consumer facing. Everything's going to be tailored towards me, when no, it seems to be more tailored towards the whim of governments and a whole bunch of other bullshit. So anyway, that's enough IoT, I think, for this week. So let's shake things up in the next segment. I'll be right back. You're listening to Sovryn Tech. All right, Sovryn Tech listeners, you know what time it is, and it's time for me to tell you about how you can secure some value, secure your wealth, all the good stuff, and how you can do it by spending some real money. And that real money, of course, is nothing less than Bitcoin. This is a Bitcoin preferred business. If you want to get your hands on some precious metals, and believe me, the Golden Stallion believes in getting golden, okay? If you want to get your hands on some precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, all the good stuff, all different kinds of coins, whatever you want, I want you to go to Roberts & Roberts Brokerage, okay? Again, they are Bitcoin preferred. I say this for a lot of things, or I don't say this for a lot of things. I really mean it when I say it here. This is one of the best businesses in the world. They are one of the best people to just straight up deal with. They're phenomenal, okay? So I want you to go to Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. You can go to gold.zog.ninja, or you can go to rrbi.co, whatever one you remember easier. But just let them know when you buy from them, or you can sell to them too. They'll buy from you. Let them know the Golden Stallion sent you. Believe me, they'll know who you're talking about, okay? They are listeners of this show. They are fans of this show, and I cannot thank them enough for being a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. So go get golden, baby. Go get some of that good old-fashioned cold storage, the original cold storage, gold and silver, at Roberts & Roberts Brokerage, gold.zog.ninja. All right, let's get back to Sovryn Tech.
History.
So you know that there are some people that are just crazy about technology, and then there's some other people, it doesn't come as naturally to them, right? Other side of the spectrum, we'll call them slow adapters.
Okay.
So we want you to check out this Commodore 64.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
This is being used by a mechanic shop in Poland. It's been used for 25 years there at this auto repair shop. It survived 25 years of abuse, of flood, all sorts of spills. These people could be considered slow adapters. The beauty of this computer, I'm going to give you some of the specs. It has 1 megahertz processor and 64 kilobytes of memory. So basically, it doesn't do internet, doesn't do video games. It just does business. And that's the way the owner likes it.
Yeah.
So no upgrades here.
But his business is still running after 25 years, so apparently it's
I guess it's working. I would take a wet wipe to that keyboard.
Oh, boy. Wow. So true story here. And of course, we are now in the tech history segment, where we talk about some aspect of the history of technology. I mean, and in this case, if you hadn't guessed from that little clip, we are talking about the Commodore 64. Now, I've promised this for a few weeks that I would finally get into this, because the importance of the Commodore 64 is that for me, it was in many ways my first computer. I mean, it wasn't perhaps literally my first computer, but in many ways, it's the one that I first really remember, kind of going to town on. And yeah, what they were talking about, that was from like a Fox 32 out of somewhere, report. What they were talking about is that in Poland, there is a garage, a car garage that is, repair shop that is still largely running on a Commodore 64. this repair shop. I mean, what a phenomenal story. Now, I mean, understand that the Commodore 64 first came out in 1982. In fact, by the exact date, it's almost to the day. It came out in January of 1982. So, it's got the years on it. I mean, what is that? Is that going to be the 25th anniversary or with 35th, right? That'd be the 35th anniversary. Holy shit. Also funny in that clip, she's calling them, you could call them slow adapters. I think she meant slow adopters, because that's a very common term to use in the tech world is, people are slow adopters as far as, with new things. I mean, adapters kind of fits too, because if you're not adapting to, new technologies, I guess, then it kind of works out the same way, but I'm pretty sure that's what she meant. Anyway, yes, the Commodore 64, that beautiful little beige box. I mean, just a very unique, device in that, well, I don't know anything that exactly copies its model. In fact, you can do a popular thing that kind of the Mac Mini sort of brought to fore a few years ago. That was just over 10 years ago now, I suppose. Was the idea, was it a BYOK or it was bring your own keyboard and mouse, whatever that ended up, it's supposed to be like bring your own beer, BYOB. And really with the Commodore 64 is kind of the opposite, No, we've got the keyboard. The computer itself is built into the keyboard, which I think was a really attractive thing for a lot of people. And this was at a time that the Commodore 64, the mouse was not the dominant user interface. Now, you eventually, a mouse was sold for the Commodore 64, but it was not, along with a million other peripherals, a million other accessories. I mean, entire companies built themselves around the accessory, options of the Commodore 64 with all of its varying ports and everything. This was something that was largely a text interface. And in fact, I remember even my oldest brother, I only have one brother that's older. The other two are younger, but my oldest sibling, my brother Wally, he was using, he was playing around on the Commodore 64, and remarkable that he could even do that too. He's not dumb, but he does, he's dyslexic. He has issues. Not a very smart guy, really, in lots of ways. That's why I say IQ's bullshit, because my brother in a billion ways is just brilliant. And I mean, and to prove it, how many people do you know could draw a snowmobile, like an Arctic Cat snowmobile using keyboard only on a Commodore 64? You probably don't know many people. Well, they're stupid, right? I guess. No. Okay. It's just, they don't know how, but he was doing that. And I thought that was, that was amazing with multiple colors. That was one of the big deals about the Commodore 64 is that, it was an 8-bit system and it had, the colors there too. A very similar color scheme, of course, to the Nintendo Entertainment System, which would come out years later. Now, most notable for having its 1 megahertz processor, not 1 gigahertz. Okay. 1 megahertz processor. So that, 1 megahertz is that 1,000 gigahertz. I mean, when today we're dealing with processors, on average of 2.2 gigahertz, this was 1 megahertz. I mean, just crazy. All right. How slow that is, by the modern computer. And of course, only 64K of RAM. Today, actually, the laptop I'm recording this on has 16 gig of RAM as compared to 64K. It's not even 64 meg of RAM. I remember my first iMac had 64 meg of RAM. This had 64K. Yee. But somehow, this is a device that's still, handling a garage in Poland. But not just somehow that, but this was a computer, so many things, the first BBSs, bulletin board systems, which were, for a lot of people, that was kind of their first introduction to the concepts of the internet, of, networking and interconnectedness and interconnected chats and MUDs. And in fact, someone just asked me recently about, hey, I'm still waiting for a MUD from Zomi Offline Games. I got you covered, baby. You just wait. But, the BBS started on a Commodore 64 because this system was just so versatile. And I think people loved, you'd have little LAN parties effectively. I mean, people just loved the ability that you could pick this whole thing up. Yeah, you'd need a monitor, but also the official monitor for the Commodore 64 was beautiful. In fact, I used the monitor far longer than I actually used the Commodore 64 because it had such a crisp image. It was really, I was playing PlayStation and Dreamcast on a Commodore 64 monitor because they had it was designed, the Commodore 64 was meant to be kind of an entry-level system, you see, because it could connect to any computer. It had the RCA jacks on the back. It had a few different type of connectors that you could either convert to or that it would have itself. And that's part of why it was so popular. I mean, there has not been, I think to this day, a system with the broad appeal as well as the broad ability as the Commodore 64. Now, another reason for its real popularity was the fact that it was such a gaming beast for its day. And I mean, this thing was a fucking beast. You want me to go down the list of some of the games that this baby could play? I mean, and it could compete and did compete with the Nintendo Entertainment System. It competed with the NES. And also, I mean, now, Commodore 64 games, some of the ones that were only for Commodore 64 are still so popular. They get emulated on GOG at GOG.com, and even the Wii and, the various Nintendo eShops. But on the Wii, one of the categories, one of the systems you could buy emulated games for, or, you could buy classic games for, was the Commodore 64 because these games were so popular. And to say nothing of the fact of what Commodore eventually, they created the Amiga, which that is an entire tech history segment on its own. The Amiga was talk about a monster. But here's some of the games. Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, classic from Lucasfilm. Maniac Mansion, another classic from Lucasfilm. And a lot of these were firsts, like they would first come out for Commodore 64. Here's one of my favorite games of all time, actually a couple of them. But one of my favorites of all time is Wasteland. I play Wasteland 2 nonstop. I'm already all set for Wasteland 3 when that comes out in 2019. Okay, and it's coming. I mean, Wasteland is the ultimate RPG. Way, in my opinion, way better than the Fallout series ever tried to be. In fact, the Fallout series just copied Wasteland. They admit to that. So, I mean, you had that game. Pirates, the classic from Sid Meier. Okay, it's Pirates with the, the exclamation point at the end. Tons of fun, that game. IK Plus. I remember like IK Plus got re-released on the Game Boy Advance. I bought it in a heartbeat because I was like, holy shit, this is the greatest karate game ever made. And it was, it's kind of like a Street Fighter, of course, very basic. That was on there. Last Ninja 2, that game was fucking amazing. Ultima 4. Well, actually, a few of the Ultimas ended up on that because I think I played Ultima 5 on it as well. Bubble Bobble was there, Defender of the Crown, Prince of Persia, of course, that's an absolute a classic. One of my favorites, Project Stealth Fighter, was just a fantastic simulator. Especially for the day. Impossible Mission, one of my favorite games that I've talked about, I think, in some Patreon episodes recently. Mule. Now it's M.U. It's an acronym. Okay, Mule, which is this awesome economy simulator, like the science fiction economy simulator. There really is no other game quite like Mule, and looked way better than it did on the NES. Just a fantastic. I mean, there's so many great games on this system. It is really something else. And it could do more. Understand that while you could see its graphical prowess when you would play a game, and of course there'd be, add-ons for that, for, tape cartridges or discs and all that. You could see that prowess. Ironically, it didn't really have a GUI. Like the entire, the Commodore 64 itself didn't really have a GUI. Again, everything was text-based. Now, after the Commodore 64's kind of heyday, there was, what was it called? GOS, I think was the name of it. And that was a GUI that was being developed. I mean, it's long out of development because unlike that, auto repair shop in Poland, nobody's really giving a shit anymore about the Commodore 64. But you cannot say enough about how revolutionary this thing was. I mean, I still wear a Commodore t-shirt. Like, really, There's pictures of me from like Porkfest where I'm wearing one. But yeah, I mean, just a very influential system. It is in many ways, like, particularly in the 80s, in the 90s, certainly Windows 3.1 and DOS, IBM compatible PCs were dominating things in the 90s. In the 80s, the very concept that you could possibly, you as an individual and not a gigantic corporation could have a computer, the Commodore was what delivered that experience to you. It is so key to the PC revolution. I mean, just in my opinion, just as key as Microsoft. I mean, to the personal computer, not just the PC revolution, but you have to say it really, understand that term, personal. This made computing personal more so than any other computer. I mean, it had predecessors. There was the VIC-20. There's certainly something to be said for that. In fact, there's that classic William Shatner commercial where he's promoting the VIC-20. I love that. But the Commodore 64 did it. And the thing I think that for a lot of people that really brought it to fore, I mean, the Apple II was a big deal. I'm not saying that wasn't a big deal as well. But just the amount of color, the amount of things that you could just do with the Commodore 64, and the fact that it was so portable. I think that suddenly people said, hey, it's kind of like when netbooks came out. When netbooks were released, I think that's when laptops really became a thing, because people said, oh, wait a second. No, now that's really something that I could carry, because it's so small, right? And so I think for a lot of people, they saw, the keyboard built in, all these things built in, the computer's built in right into the keyboard. You could carry it anywhere and you could plug it into any television. That's when the average person finally said, this is for me. This is personal. So it's a big deal. Now, there was a recent, in like the past few years, and as far as I know, it's already dead, and that's such a shame. There was kind of an attempt, a pull at nostalgia. Maybe if they came out with it now, they would have done better. But about maybe like 3-4 years ago, I think we talked about it on Sovryn Tech. There, Commodore, not the original Commodore company, but a new company with the name Commodore. They must have bought the rights. They were releasing things that look just like the Commodore 64, computers that look just like that with the keyboard built in, the whole thing. And they were selling it with, but modern parts in it where, it would have a 2.6 gigahertz Core i7, whatever inside of it. But it ended up not going anywhere. And I mean, I guess I can understand why, but boy, you gotta love the Commodore 64.
Now, baby, I gotta tell you, when I want to keep an eye on things, all things going on in the cryptocurrency space, when I want to keep an eye on prices, when I want to know about the new tools, the new wallets, or what are the best ones to use, all of that stuff, or when I want to get social when it comes to cryptocurrency, I go to cryptocompare.com. Oh man, I mean, I love this website. I'm not kidding when I say I leave it open 24/7 on my big rig. I mean, it's ready for whenever a question comes up for me for Sovryn Tech about something in crypto or whatever. I'm always checking that out, and just to keep an eye on things, just to know what's going on. To keep fresh, keep that flavor going. I mean, and they list off everything. Bitcoin, all your altcoins. They got you covered. So I want you to check out cryptocompare.com, and I cannot thank them enough for being a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. All right, let's get back to the show.
The Climax.
Overseas now, and the mystery death of singer George Michael. Authorities in London today revealing initial post-mortem results are inconclusive. More tests will be needed to determine the exact cause of death. His manager says Michael died of apparent heart failure in his home on Christmas Day. Police do not suspect foul play. Back here at home, into an ABC News exclusive, Todd Fisher speaking out for the first time on camera, stunned by the painful loss of his sister Carrie Fisher and mother Debbie Reynolds, the two dying just a day apart, and the family now planning a memorial service for mother and daughter. Fisher sitting down with ABC News and revealing their final personal moments. Here's ABC's Matt Gutman.
If I loved you,
it's magical, the love story that went on for 60 years. And I got to see 58 and 3/4 of it.
They were close in life and will be closer in memory. Debbie Reynolds' son, Todd Fisher, in an exclusive interview telling 2020's Elizabeth Vargas the family is planning to hold a dual funeral service for the Singing in the Rain star,
life was a song,
who died Wednesday, and her daughter, who played the indomitable Princess Leia, who died just a day earlier.
We're going to have a joint service for them. We're going to put them together, and that's how she would want it.
Todd Fisher recounting his mother's final moments just hours after Carrie Fisher's passing.
She then said that she really wanted to be with Carrie. She said that in those precise words. And within 15 minutes from that conversation, she faded out. And within 30 minutes, she technically was gone.
That bond began with her children watching adoringly. This 1964 photograph of Carrie mesmerized by her mother performing on stage in Las Vegas.
We always were sitting in the wings watching my mother on stage in awe.
There were rough patches, but if anyone could handle Carrie Fisher's addictions and battle with bipolar disorder, Todd says it was their mother.
It's horrible. It's beautiful. It's magical. They're together.
And they'll be together in perpetuity. Todd Fisher telling us that mother and daughter will be buried side by side right next to old friends like Liberace and Betty Davis here in Los Angeles. He also tells us there will be a private family service and a public one for their millions of fans. Tom.
An incredibly revealing interview. Matt, thank you.
So, as you heard at the very, very beginning of this episode is absolutely dedicated to Carrie Fisher, who died this past week at the age of 60. Very young. Of course, I think any age is young. I kind of half jested, and I assure you it's a half jest, that, we may be living in a generation where some people, may never die, like that life extension technology and all that is getting there. Unfortunately, Carrie Fisher will not be able to take advantage of that. Also, George Michael died the day previous to, I believe it was the day, or maybe just the day before, or, 2 days before, that Carrie Fisher died. And then the day after Carrie Fisher died, of course, Carrie Fisher's mother, the very famous Debbie Reynolds, died as well. And you heard all in that clip, a lot of the reactions and thoughts to that. And you heard from Debbie Reynolds' son and, of course, Carrie Fisher's brother, Todd Fisher, about all of that. So, the past couple weeks on this show, we've been talking about Star Wars. Obviously, it is no secret that I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I mean, just fucking massive. I just got a couple more of, what equate to, there are these visual guides that equate to, encyclopedias for the Star Wars universe, and they all act in universe. And I tear into these things because I want to know everything, just as much as I want to know everything about the reality I live in. I am the same way with the fictions and the franchises I love. I want to know everything that's happening inside of them. I could say a lot about George Michael as well. I'm certainly a fan. Not as big a fan, say, as some of the others who passed away this year. Of course, we opened the show up with a song by Prince from the Batman soundtrack, the song Trust, one of my favorites. Prince is certainly, that one hit me hard. And on, was it the 28th, I believe, of 2015, not of 2016, but it was kind of how it feels like a lot of these celebrity deaths really started. Was when Lemmy Kilmister died, and I'm just a huge Motorhead fan. I mean, huge. Like, I'm 6'1", 205, 205 pounds. I'm a big guy, but yeah, I mean, George Michael was phenomenal. I'm not going to take anything away from that. Just fantastic songs. I talked a little bit about this on this week's Patreon Q&A episode. And I kind of jested, and I meant it in a flattering way. I assure you, that the song by George Michael or Wham, whatever, was called Last Christmas, that really took on a whole new meaning, didn't it? And yeah, one of the greats. I mean, even a guy, I was listening to George Michael. He had that album come out, I think, in 2004 called Patience. And that was, the title track on that was fantastic. It was an awesome album. As far as, the cause of his death, some people saying drugs, some people saying they have, it's inconclusive, they don't know. A shame either way, because with George Michael in particular, really both of the deaths, I guess, that I'm talking about are concentrating on here. I won't be concentrating on Debbie Reynolds so much, but, certainly that's a loss as well. But, both people here, Carrie Fisher and George Michael, really pushed the cultural envelope as far as, with George Michael, the acceptance of homosexuality, with Carrie Fisher, the acceptance of the idea that a woman could kick ass. Like a woman could kill, a gigantic gangster, right? That being Jabba the Hutt, and do it looking good. And all kinds of things that, wow, leading a rebellion. I mean, yeah, it's fiction. I get that. George Michael wasn't fiction. His struggle with, getting acceptance in broader society, in the world, was a very real one, as to where Carrie Fisher had her own issues. She had, certainly mental illnesses that she had struggled with and battled, and, it looks like she came out on top, a phenomenon. So yeah, George Michael, again, both of these people, really, really were very much trendsetters in what they did, and, and the validity and the viability they brought to everything that they were doing, whether it was on stage or off. But I gotta say, the death of Carrie Fisher, this one, like I said, Prince hit me hard, Lemmy hit me kind of hard, or, hit me pretty hard. And there have been other tragic ones, some for me that were actually very personal, people, not celebrities, but, very personal people that definitely, hit me hard, and others. There's been some big names, Leonard Cohen. There's so many, so many of these celebrities that a lot of people grew up with or have known for decades that passed away. It's a shitty year. It was a really shitty year. But, I got to say that, Carrie Fisher dying, like this one really hit. Like the day that it happened, I remember the day that it happened, and I was like, I felt out of it. Like I felt, I don't know, this is what happens with death, after deaths, there becomes a new normal, and a part of your reality, it really gets stripped away from you. These people are part of your worldview. They're part of, what you see, what you expect, what you anticipate in everyday life. And when they go away, that's gone. So yeah, in a very real sense, your reality gets stripped out from underneath you. And, it's not just that, because I think some people might want to simplify it and say, well, you're just mad that she won't be in episode 9 or something, which, that's a big question in the air. Is she going to be, because she reprised her role and regained a lot of fame recently because of her amazing performance in episode 7 of Star Wars, The Force Awakens, last year. And as far as we know, she is completely done with filming for episode 8. So she'll be in episode 8, no matter what. Episode 9 is where things are in question. And of course, what might happen is that, maybe they'll just do a CGI overlay on an actor, much like they did with Rogue One, right? Spoiler alert, but if you didn't know that already, come on. I don't know, but that's in a lot of ways, that's not what this is about. In the 70s, you kind of, I think there was the start to having really powerful female characters. You could say, I don't know if you want to count Charlie's Angels, or, certainly Linda Carter's Wonder Woman, or even in the early 80s, you would have Erin Gray, playing a Colonel Wilma Deering in Buck Rogers, and in some other, and certainly, Nichelle Nichols, who's amazingly still alive. I was so concerned, with all the deaths happening in 2016, you'd think she would have been, but her playing Uhura was, one of the original, women that was able to, at least to some degree, display that they're a human being on television, especially as a black woman, even more so. But yeah, I don't remember, life without Star Wars. And when you stick with it, when you don't lose your, and I understand why, it kind of gets beaten out of kids, sometimes metaphorically, sometimes literally, so that certain, that penchant for imagination and creativity, if you can keep that, if you can survive out of childhood with that intact, I never gave up on a lot of that stuff. I never gave up on Star Wars, obviously never gave up on Star Trek, never gave up on a lot of these things. And, I talked about, like I said, I talked about this a little bit on the Patreon Q&A. We're going into overtime, by the way, affiliates, if you didn't already notice. But I want to talk about this a bit. In the 80s and 90s, now it's not like it's any different, just the devices are different. But, a lot of parents would, sit their kid down in front of the television, and maybe they'd pop in a tape on the VCR, or they'd teach you how to do it yourself. And, you could watch shit all day long, and the parents couldn't be happier because they could go off and do their own thing, right? They could be the absentee landlord, of your life. And so, I've said this many times over the years, and it's, I still stand by it, and people somehow get confused by what I'm saying. I don't fucking understand what's so hard to get about this. But, for a lot of us, like, TV raised us. Our parents didn't. TV did. What the TV was, a lot of what the TV was saying, we sort of integrated. Fortunately for me, I feel like what I integrated was, pretty good ethical stuff. Like watching Star Trek and Star Wars. And Star Trek has some very powerful, great, even, dare I say, libertarian, moral messages to dole out there. I mean, and honestly, the show was like almost admitted by some of the producers, it was a very subversive show in bringing on a lot of, new cultural ideas and new cultural, almost, I don't want to say norms, but, Star Trek was the first show where a white man and a black woman kissed. It's the first time anybody ever saw that on television. What are you going to do about that? When that would have, that was unheard of at the time, or, not really acceptable at all. And, but Star Wars kind of had the same thing where it certainly, I think it shows a kid to appreciate kind of adventure and just it gives such a great framework for your imagination to run wild, because when you watch that, like that the universe is fucking huge, and as long as you're not some kind of, nut job flat earther, like that, that's very exciting. And to see such, for me, to see, as a young person, to see such a powerful female character, in both genres. I mean, Star Trek and Star Wars were kind of my big thing growing up, and Battlestar Galactica, but I didn't get to see that as often. But, and up until the 90s when Babylon 5 came out, then that became a big deal. But it was, it was true for most of those as well, that, you thankfully you had these, just ridiculously powerful, take no shit female characters. And that was, I thought that was so, that was so cool. And I think in many ways it's great role modeling, because it allowed me to, and if you want to disagree with this, go fucking ahead. Okay. But I'm going to have my say, cause it's my goddamn show. Okay. It allowed me to respect my female friends. I've had more female friends in my life than I ever had guy friends, frankly. And why is that? Maybe it's because I just treated them like normal people, because I grew up watching Princess Leia saying, "Get into the chute, flyboy." And constantly insulting and, making a mockery out of, these dimwits trying to rescue her. Right. I mean, it's awesome. And that came off as so legit because of the acting prowess of Carrie Fisher. There's something to be said for separating the art from the artist. Certainly that needs to be done, but there are parts, obviously, of the actor that ends up in the character. And I think she delivered, she really, really delivered on a lot of that. And it was just, it was so cool. And I mean, definitely one of my first crushes. I like to say my first crush was, was Saavik from Star Trek II, played by, oh wow, that's terrible that I can't think of her name from Cheers. Anyway, but yeah, Carrie Fisher was just one of those where it's like, oh yeah. All right. And, I got to give credit to Disney, and there's a lot to be said for this, is that, I give credit to Disney for, and I talked about this in my Rogue One review a couple of weeks ago, they have quadrupled by orders of magnitude. They have increased the amount of women in the Star Wars universe, when for a time, there was pretty much only one. I mean, yeah, there was Mon Mothma, there was the gal on Hoth, I know that, but really, the only one that actually had any fleshed out character, you had one. You had Princess Leia. As far as guys, I mean, you had Luke, you had Vader, you had Han Solo, you had Lando Calrissian. I mean, you had, Chewie, you had tons of them. And for Leia to be able to carry, for Carrie Fisher, really, to be able to carry the franchise, no pun intended there, of Star Wars on sheer force of personality, and making it viable, to where, like, guys recognize the strength of the woman involved, and where, a lot of female fans got in on it. I mean, that's really an achievement. In the middle of a goddamn sausage fest, she delivered. And this is to say nothing of her, of Carrie Fisher's other multitude of talents. I mean, as a script writer, as a script editor, as a writer, in acting in other movies, of course, When Harry Met Sally, Drop Dead Fred, one of my favorite movies of all time. Just a slew of parts that she's been in, a lot of which you probably didn't know. I mean, she never really stopped acting. How do you get any higher profile than Star Wars? You fucking can't. Okay. But, she was still a big part of it. A big part of Hollywood and all that in a million ways, either behind the camera or on it. So yeah, for all of that, yeah, I mean, this really, really hit me hard. And I'm not saying that it should have, but it did. I don't know. I remember saying on this show when Prince died, I said, I still know this and I feel this, I know that the older I get, and please, I'm just 35. Okay. But I know that the older I get, the more I have to leave behind. I understand. Okay. But I just don't, I don't want to, like, and I know that this is like, okay, so I said this on social media the other day, right? I said, I was like, look, I've made a career, okay, out of hating everything new, out of hating everything. All right. And business is good. All right. 2017, here we go. I mean, that's so much of what I get out there on Sovryn Tech. But, I like to bring up, no, I don't hate everything. There's things I'm interested in. I'm interested in cryogenics, life extension technology. I'm interested in virtual reality. I am totally bullish on virtual reality. Let's go, let's do it. But I know when I, do some introspection, when I, look at myself and say, all right, why do you get excited about virtual reality? Well, part of it is because I think that in many ways, like, I could keep those things. I don't have to leave those things behind anymore. With virtual reality, in many ways, they could stay with me in ways that I could interact with them, not just in the fact that, there's something to be said that, yes, as long as we remember Carrie Fisher, as long as we continue to experience and enjoy perhaps even the character of Princess Leia, who is, I've said for years, is my favorite, Star Wars character and all this, that in many ways, she's still alive. Now, please, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in an afterlife whatsoever. When you're done, you're done. And you don't get to upload your brain either, to a tin can. Okay. The person's gone. But, you can still kind of enjoy in a very strange way. I think, that's one of the reasons I get excited about VR is because, I in some ways I could still experience all this. So, I recognize that's what's going on there. So, but I don't want to leave this stuff behind anymore. I don't, and I'm sitting here recording this. It's 6 PM on, December 31st, 2016. And, I'm kind of like, are we going to get some kind of news in the next 6 hours? Is William Shatner going to go? Like who's, who's going to go? And you 2 points. And I'm trying to express this, and I think I'm being really long-winded with it. But look, I'm trying to say that some of these people, yeah, they're just celebrities. Now, I've had the pleasure, fortunately, years ago, of meeting Carrie Fisher and talking with her. She was a wonderful woman. Okay. I've had the pleasure of meeting, sometimes even befriending some of my heroes, full-on celebrities in my life. Okay. And you could say, well, a lot of them you never meet. They're never going to really be a part of their life. They're not even like who they are in real life, who they are on the camera or on the printed page or on the CD or whatever. But look, you internalize these people. They become a part of your experience. They become a part of your human journey. They become the journey of your life. They're not just other people. They're not just some people are just celebrities. Like, I wish no harm to anyone, and I don't want anyone to die. Okay. Longtime listeners of this show know how I feel about all that. All right. But like, really, Kim Kardashian going, you know, I don't want her to go. I'm just saying that, like, somehow I don't know how that's going to impact, you know, the world in such a heavy way as some of these other celebrities. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm not picking on a woman by no means. Okay. It's the first example that comes to my mind. Okay. There are people who seem to just be celebrities and somehow they're just celebrities for breathing air. And I don't get it. But some of these people really delivered something incredible, you know, to our lives. Something foundational, perhaps. You know, some of these people go, it fucking hurts. And if it all happens in a short span of time, you know, and you want to, you know, rail against it. Here's my second point. And you want to fucking rail against it, you know, and just call it an abstract thing like a year. Like, I mean, you know, it's a popular thing on social media right now, or, you know, for the past year. It's like, damn it, 2016, what the fuck? Stop taking people. And you know what, I noticed in the past few days, past week maybe, there's a lot of people saying, stop blaming an arbitrary number. No, shut up. Do you think people are that dumb that they actually think 2016 is some kind of corporeal entity that, you know, is killing people? No, of course it's not. Nobody believes that. So shut your fucking mouth and let people grieve in whatever way they need to. Even if maybe it didn't really mean anything to them until the person died, at least they get to connect with other human beings over it. Let people connect. Stop telling them what they should and shouldn't feel. Even people that I think, you know, like in my circles, you know, that really should be able to, that in my opinion, you know, have a good grasp on death, as in like there's no afterlife, and, you know, or that, you know, kind of the finality of it and all this stuff. You know, when they come off as fucking assholes towards people who are in some form of grief, man, and some of these people are the people that are going around telling others how they should act and how they should, you know, operate life outside of, you know, if there were no governments and all this and the nature of property and the nature of human existence. You don't understand shit. And it's obvious in just your fucking, you know, dickish comments. Or people complaining about, oh, great, somebody else died. Now my Facebook feed is going to be filled with pictures of this person. Let people grieve. Let people feel something, for fuck's sake. And with so much fake in this world, let people feel something goddamned real. It just makes it worse. It really does. You know, like, I mean, I've been to, you know, in my family, just in my family alone, I've been to so many funerals. I hate it. In the military, I had to deal with so many, which you could barely call funerals. Okay. And there were times where, you know, I you know, just dealt with it and, you know, didn't have any emotions whatsoever and just shut everything down and shut it all off and, you know, and dealt with it. But you know what I did? I didn't complain about the fact that other people were crying, or I didn't complain about how other people were acting about it, or if they were, you know, being perhaps, you know, kind of hysterical. And I mean that with all respect. It's just a way to define the actions, you know, arm waving and all this other shit. Okay. I just went silent. And that's what people just need to do. Okay. If you know, really, if you are just going to rip on people for grieving, just shut your mouth. Anyway, this is one that hit a lot of people hard. Carrie Fisher. Just a, you know, not a perfect woman, not a perfect person. Who the fuck is? But she really, really, you know, delivered. I think she inspired, I should say, so many people. She certainly inspired me. And I really think she had a lot more work to do. I think she could have continued to inspire. How many people talked about when The Force Awakens came out, how wonderful it was that with having Carrie Fisher on the cast and being such a prominent character, obviously, that finally you could see a woman, that was supposed to be in her 60s or something. I mean, even though she was only 60 at the time, and be 60 instead of having to get masked to look like she was 40 or 30 or something, right? Like that she could actually be old. She could have wrinkles and it was okay to see that on the screen. That's huge. Still inspiring. Even decades after she last played the character. But now she's gone. I'm kind of reminded, and if you chuckle about this, I understand, because it's somewhat of, being somewhat joculant, but, I'm reminded of a quote from Attack of the Clones, from episode 2 of Star Wars, where Anakin says, "I will even learn to stop people from dying." Now, he said it with a modicum of bad acting. I say it with conviction. Maybe I won't learn myself, but I'm certainly going to support those that are trying to put a stop to this thing, because I am just so done with people dying. Too many are going. Too many people that were just, too integral, at least in my opinion, to my own life, and that I wish all the happiness in the world for because of all the happiness they brought into my life. It's kind of the nature of egoism. So Carrie Fisher will be missed. I can't thank her enough for, even in just the few hours that she performed that I would regularly watch, how much she inspired me, how much joy she brought to me. And this episode of Sovryn Tech absolutely goes out to her. George Michael as well, please. Good thing 2016 will be over soon, and maybe, I don't know, whatever is going on is gonna stop. Maybe 2017 will be the year of life extension. Woo, let's do it. Anyway, enough Sovryn Tech for this week. I'll see you on the other side. Thank
you. You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.